In a world where your direction in life was entirely decided for you, do you think you'd be happy? Or even further, in a world where that fact is never questioned, because the agent doing so is meant to bring you the greatest happiness and you were raised believing that fact, do you think you could be happy? I'd say no for the first question. After all, many of us already live in some semblance of that state. While we have opportunities to pick from, most of them are kind of the same framework with a different paint, lives of servitude which can't be escaped. And from my experience at least, most aren't happy with these paths. However, we aren't happy because we hold some awareness that things could be different. We've had times which prove so, and many of us come from cultures emphasizing the individual at a high level. And so I would answer yes to the second question. If I was raised in a collective-focused culture where that was the norm, I think it would be much easier to find value in the small things surrounding my decided path, because I would hold the belief that it was my ideal path, whether that fact is actually true or not. All that matters is that I don't find a reason to search, instead falling into a state of acceptance and comfort. And that is the key word, comfort. It's something we seek above all else, from clothing to friendships to the media we watch, often a warm, cozy feeling against a cold and vast world. Comfortable is almost never used in a negative context, and you could even say it's the driving force of most of our actions. After all, even seeking money is the means to be comfortable in more ways. But does this hold us back? Are we kept in unaware stasis from the lack of pain? And even more, does it have active negative effects? Is the so-called echo chamber of modern society bemoaned by nuclear disarmists and war hawks alike, the vapid nature of social media fame chasing, the epidemic of loneliness you see articles about each day, all a result of this important principle of comfort? And if so, is there anything we can embrace to return value to this possibly bastardized concept? Anyone who's seen anything from me before knows I'm introducing the premise of the 2012 Urobuchi masterpiece Psycho-Pass in those two questions. As such, you probably know the more specific details of its premise already, so feel free to skip to the next chapter to avoid a repetitious setup. But for anyone unfamiliar, the story takes place in 2112 Japan, the single holdout peaceful nation in a chaotic world, which remains so due to the Sibyl System, a supercomputer means of reading the will of human beings. With this power, it can determine aptitudes for paths in life, placing people in their ideal careers, while also preventing crimes before they occur, creating latent criminals. People who simply thought of or might have committed a crime, but never actually did so. No one locks their doors, and the police force is some 20 people because peace is so widespread, although those locked away pay the collective price, often never seeing the outside world again, no matter their efforts or mindset. In addition to this, stress has become a disease of sorts, medicated away as it raises your crime coefficient, the measure of crime likelihood, a value over 100 getting you locked away, and a value over 300 getting you executed. Due to this, some become living shells, unable to cope with the stress which comes from a world where stress itself is a fear, and medicating themselves into a state where no stimulus can be felt. As a waxing poet might put it, serenity to the point of simulated death. There is an aspect of dystopian control to the Sibyl System. For example, if acting against authority is an element of how they measure intent to commit a crime, isn't it a self-serving cycle which crushes even reasonable dissent and instead tends its citizens towards a blind comfort no matter the reality of their situations? After all, if no one is questioning what is right and wrong, how do we know which is actually being enacted? These are just a couple of the ideas at the heart of Shogo Makishima's arguments, a man questioning the Sibyl System in the name of free will, which he believes has been stripped of the equation. He's a flaw in the system, criminally asymptomatic, meaning he can perform any action he pleases without triggering the automated scanners which dot their city and check each and every intent, or the Dominators, weapons which do the same. Slicing throats right before Sibyl's eyes, his psychopathic tendencies keep his crime coefficient as low as even 0 at times. A danger to their society, he's chased down by the inspectors and enforcers of the MWPSB, the former civilians, the latter latent criminals let out to catch latent criminals. namely Akane Tsunemori of the former camp and Shinya Kogami of the latter, who each have lost or end up losing someone they love at the hands of the killer. In this web, a deep story of ideals, rivalry, and society is formed, and it's one I'll appreciate until my last thoughts for being the first real inspiration for what I do here. If you haven't seen it, I'd recommend checking it out first before watching this video so you can get the really more important experience. And if you end up loving it and want more content on it, I only have some 14 other videos on it for a little bit more. But whether you listen to a quick recap or not, what we're most interested in today is Shogo Makishima. It seems that after I started my love affair with Psycho-Pass with him, I turned my attention to the other characters, only to come back to him again with a new perspective. Now, I often describe Akane as the ideal citizen. She scored perfectly on her aptitudes, and no matter what, her crime coefficient seems incapable of rising, seemingly due to her high consideration of society at that. She has quotes I've poured over for how much they speak to the very point of society, things like, the law doesn't protect people, people protect the law. In a balance of individualism and collective, she truly does form an ideal center. But in a way, Shogo Makishima is the ideal citizen. While she is everything which could make a society ideal if spread about among the civilians, he is everything which is fit to thrive in their current one. But as we recapped, he can commit any action and not be judged for it. All of his actions are cost-free. But to add more detail, he gets away with it even if it's witnessed because their society and its structure are at their core incapable of handling him. Both the drones and the people literally can't process what's occurring or find the ways to do so, as all the old laws were abolished with the advent of Sibyl. There is no court system to judge him. Makishima is, as far as is coded into society, a perfectly lawful individual. The rules and regulations which guide this peaceful world judge him as ideal. He can do as he pleases, befriend anyone he wishes to, walk any path as he seems not to have a career or tasks which he must accomplish, obtain anything he needs for any purpose, and even kill as he sees fit. All things we witness him do. Even further, he has no stress in his life during this, no worry about slipping up and being locked away forever just for existing, as others like Ginoza build their entire selves against, meaning even those with wide open paths can still have reason to envy him as he escapes that looming fear, where even the ones sitting comfortable do so on a razor's edge, one movement away from demise. He has no such peril. A year or so ago, I wrote and rewrote a script that never made it to fruition, where I did criticize how well his character is written for one fact, that he's perfect. He's young and smart and charismatic and well-read and versed in all arts and physically adept to boot. There's no way for someone to be all of these things. Wisdom and youth are at odds. Physical strength and mental capability each take up large swaths of time, and charisma is often sacrificed while one studies. He shouldn't be all of these things. It's a fact we see about plenty of characters, like Yagami, Lelouch, Lamperouge, these charismatic villainous men who only succeed because they were written to master all things. And Shogo Makishima is of course the same. However, the script never sounded right because somehow it actually does make sense and thematically fit for him to be this way. While the others still have duties and lives which should make their status impossible, school and siblings and conflict they cannot avoid, Makishima doesn't. He has no responsibilities, no tragic past, no stress, nothing he must accomplish or nowhere he has to be. There is nothing he has ever had to spend his time doing but what he saw fit. He is perfect because his life, his conditions are perfect. He can be fit and able to reference 17 works of philosophy at any moment because this world is his, where the others are inherently built to fight their worlds, being perfect in spite of it. He is built to live in his world, perfect only because of it. This is all to say he is more comfortable than anyone else, even in a world specifically designed to be comfortable above all. And yet, all of these words we said mean nothing to him. He is the one who seeks to destroy that which makes the world his, the Sibyl System. Despite its shortcomings being exactly why he can consider such things in the first place, he wants it gone, even as he admits not knowing what will arise on the other side once it is, but for sure knowing it won't be as perfect for him as it is now. He removes his lack of duty by placing himself in the open to challenge it, creating a clock to race against as his actions are uncovered, introducing stress as Akane and Kogami dedicate their lives to catching him, analyzing every act so he can never move freely again. He kills off the people who adore him and would do anything for him to test it, both its rightness and its flaws. Essentially, he sacrifices all he holds to create a worse unknown. Why would he? Well, part of the answer would be ideals, and that's the part which I focused on for so long. He's an intelligent man who's seeking out something greater than basic pleasure seeking because he finds a value in free will which doesn't exist in this world anymore. He wants others to know what he does and honestly to suffer once more in decision because that's a big part of what living is. However, the way he goes about introducing free will once more is actually all about base emotion chasing. With the help of Che Gusong, he creates a helmet which is able to bypass Sibyl's scans from copying a nearby person's readings. At first, he introduces these into the wild through the most obvious criminals, immediately making them an object of fear. As more and more get their hands on them, chaos breaks loose with not just criminals fighting, but citizens emerging in crazed actions to prevent their own deaths and then further becoming the ones launching attacks themselves in preemptive strikes. Riots ensue and the entire city devolves into a chaos of kill or be killed. There's rumors and lies and theft. It's all those base impulses and desires which he found repressed in the modern citizen expressed in the most gruesome and grand fashion. And so we know that his goal is in some way about those more raw emotions, and in a way, pleasure even, as he's pleased with the result that people are acting on such things, at least as a baseline. Even if that chaos isn't the end goal, it is the necessary start, something which must be embraced. But how can it be about pleasure if he has just given up the most comfortable life to do so? If that was the goal, then wouldn't he have just stayed exactly as he was? While it may seem that way, there's a matter of perspective lurking in the shadows which can explain what we need, and it comes out best in one of his lines which speaks on the surface to a different element of psychopaths. When he's confronted by Akane Tsunemori, about to kill her friend Yuki Kanahara right before her, he actually offers her a gun to replace the useless Dominator which can't read him as a criminal so that she has a chance to stop or even kill him. Akane is unable to consider doing so though via her own decision, as Sibyl has made every single important decision like that for her entire life, so it seems incomprehensible for her to choose whether someone should live or die. But in trying to test her to see if free will can be drawn out from a citizen under Sibyl, he asks her to use the gun instead, to aim at him with determination and to feel
the importance of life resting gingerly against your fingertip.
The idea is that this should be stressful to her because a life is a valuable thing, and so taking it or not should be a tough decision, not listening to a false oracle to make it easy. It mirrors what's expressed by Kogami when he continues to train his body despite the Dominators doing all the work.
It keeps the pain here where it always should be.
By training, he's able to feel the wear, tear, and exhaustion which taking a life used to denote, a physical cost which stresses the importance of the decision to pull the trigger, even if it's only allowed by another. These ideas are mostly in the context of justice, who is deciding who should live and who should die. It is a weighted decision which requires debate and cost, not a hidden computation. However, the base of these statements is a more root assumption, that important things should not come easily. To take a life, one must sacrifice something of extreme value because that's the only thing which proves life is valuable to begin with. If it's able to be destroyed without effort at any place and any time, then it's only worth whatever minimal effort it took. The point he proves by killing Yuki is that if someone can't put their own will to defend life, can consider killing one to save another, then life is worthless. He can't be judged because to him this is a fact. What he's doing is not wrong, but logical as he sees it. While it's psychopathic, the base assumption is true. Things are worth what we give up for them, whether that's money, equivalent trade, the energy and effort to steal them, or anything of the like. All of our systems work under some idea of this fact. The same is true of comfort. If everyone is comfortable all the time, that is, there is no work being done to achieve it, then how do we know that it's actually valuable or right? It becomes the reason one friend will watch another die, even given the chance to save her. If achieved without thought, it stops being a way to seek better conditions and becomes a downfall, a reason for people to persist in lack of effort and never knowing different, not some sort of idyllic end goal. We see this shown off in the citizens, of course, but also in more detail in the minor villains of Psycho-Pass, who claim to contrast against such citizens, but actually fail to do so, only further showing Makishima's distaste for comfort as well. Now, we've talked about them in this sort of way in detail before, so I'll be brief and examine just one. Take, for example, Rikika Oreo, the Oso Academy student who makes gruesome sculptures with the real bodies of other students she kills. Her father Roichi was a celebrated artist of his time who used the same motif for the purpose of introspection, confronting people with awful ideas so they would understand and then come to terms with them. However, with the advent of Sibyl, both he and others found it unnecessary since automated scans were uncovering the depths of the soul for them, and so he willingly retired, becoming one of those shells created from the medicating away of all stress. His death is striking because there is no change to it. He looks the same both before and after. Rikiko, angry at a world which created this situation, as well as her father's acceptance of his own downfall, uses the methods of a previous case where bodies were plasticized to make her paintings inspired by his into real sculptures. She is, in a way, a mockery of an artist, in that she puts lengthy speeches behind her works to explain the motivations behind them, and anyone who witnesses them without these can't discern the point. We see this directly as Kogami compares it to the previous case, where there were distinct messages like placing grotesque sculptures under the hollow scenery for mental health care. For days, people walked past turmoil hidden beneath medication, a rather raw statement about their society. Rikiko instead places in parks and open spaces, seeking the greatest attention rather than making such a point, and she'll admit as much herself.
Have you decided where you'll display it?
Out in the open, somewhere that will attract as much attention as possible.
Despite saying that she'll continue her father's work, she actually goes against the very spirit of it, clamoring for the eyes of a world which locked her away in an old-fashioned academy to produce a meek and submissive wife. And she's a child who lost everything important to her and her own voice. It's understandable that she would lash out. This is exactly why Makishima tests her, providing the means to express that voice because there is power behind such feelings and he desires to see how it will play out. This is someone who lacks comfort. What will they seek from this? However, he's disappointed when she continues to express a desire for attention above all, because it says that what's coming from her discomfort with life is not an actual attempt to answer it, but rather a statement that she wants what hasn't been allowed to her. She uses all of his resources not to change and grow, but rather to dig deeper into what she always wanted, to continue making the same works for the same reason. She's popular at the academy, able to capture any of the girls' attention, which speaks to this as well. She's really created herself to gain that attention, whether through art or simply through living life in her bounds. It's a seeking of comfort, knowing that one is unique, special, or desired. This rears its head again as she never questions or challenges Makishima on his words. When he asks what she thinks about Titus Andronicus, the answer she gives is capped off with, "Is that right, Mr. Makishima?" Because she doesn't want an original thought which forces him to consider. She wants to confirm his own in an attempt to maintain his attention. Knowing that's what she desires, comfort, she believes he would like the same. What we see, and what he discards her for, is that she's the same as the citizens, seeking only comfort with closed eyes and covered ears. It's just that she was excluded when society cast off opportunity for safety, since her ideas lay in danger, and so she couldn't find comfort in Sibyl but had to look outside. If she was a citizen who could blend in, then she would have conformed. Her dissent is only a result of being disallowed. What we see is a stagnation on all sides, a world where even the people going against society seek out its guiding principle. with comfort ruling all, the necessary consideration and confrontational discussion to create a better society is off the table, and perpetuation will feed itself. Whether hero, villain, or citizen, it's become a fact of life. There is certainly a downfall to comfort. Their world will never grow or change. But there is another level to this. After all, if something is good, constant maintenance doesn't sound like the worst possible fate. In many ways, we all know this fact as we settle into aspects of daily life, even with our hatred for them. However, this fault doesn't simply end the line, but rather leads to other faults, consequences of the stasis which can have much worse effects. We've already seen the citizens and the outliers, so what's left then is the ruler themselves, Sibyl. Now, we're entering the real plot twist spoilers here, so be warned, there's no going back, and I'd recommend experiencing the series first before hearing these details. But Sibyl is not actually a supercomputer as advertised, but rather a collective of criminally asymptomatic brains, the very same outliers like Makishima. With their cold, detached view of emotional acts, they believe a conglomerate of such minds working in tandem will create a simulated perfect perspective, using outlier cases to prevent outlier cases. And for the most part, this does work. Makishima is an excessive rarity in their world, one so valuable they seek to incorporate him into their ranks. After being captured by Akane and Kogami, as the PSB just barely manages to contain his riots, he's placed aboard a transport with the body of Sibyl, Chief Kase, and extended an invitation. An invitation to have his brain tossed in a jar and live forever above society as they do, a ruler beyond the blind. It's even offered by Kozaburo Toma, the very man who Rikiko copied her methods from and Makishima's former accomplice, since the mind of Sibyl take turns operating this cyborg body of the MWPSB leader. However, something what we've stated here already shows the fault in Sibyl's ways, and how they represent an even worse fate from comfort than just the stasis we covered before. As they invite Makishima in, the offer is one of excess, saying that he can give up his body and join the ranks of a god, which Sibyl sees itself as, going so far as to literally state this.
I feel like a god from a pantheon of ancient myth. Everything in the world is under my rule.
It's probably the most blatantly written episode of the entire anime, 22 minutes of just conversation, ensuring that you can't misunderstand their beliefs. Added in with the multiple times we see their corruption and use of individuals, like how they attempt to manipulate Ganoza into killing his own friend against even their own rules and then discard him, we get a clear picture that they are not quite growing or changing either, locked into an echo chamber where the true determination of crime is likely whatever does or doesn't pose a threat to their rule, since they have a clear bias. However, this is only the start, as the very idea of being a god is the reason they almost fall from grace to begin with, the reason they have to exhibit those echo chamber qualities so obviously. That is, their comfort is most notably what can lead to its own entire erasure. The way Shogo Makishima finally reveals himself enough to be caught is in a direct assault on Sibyl. With help from Che, they isolate the energy usage and data transfer patterns of the city to find the common point that is Nona Tower, underneath of which Sibyl's brains are housed. The blueprints have been altered to show only 4 basement floors, although the original plans allocate much lower. Another key point is that, of course, it had to be unguarded for them to make such an entry, and it is because this is during the distribution of helmets, which led to rioting, another aspect of his plan as the MWPSB is drawn away from home base, allowing them to walk in unanswered. It seems almost too easy, these poorly hidden secrets, as if anyone could have done it with a couple weeks of effort. The only real barrier is that hacking or gathering supplies for the helmets would lead to a heightened crime coefficient. That is, thinking about doing so is the only actual barrier. The methods themselves are actually not extraordinary. It's rather the intent to uncover these flimsy held secrets which is. That is the issue. Because Sibyl sees themselves as God and created a world which they believe to be perfectly unchallengeable, they were not prepared to actually defend what they had created when tested. The poorly hidden secrets, the 20-some officers for an entire city, the blatant corruption, it's all the result of finding themselves so comfortable, discomfort is inconceivable as they flaunt their status ill-prepared. The premise is that as long as no one questions the system, it works perfectly, and as such, it creates evidence for itself to persist. The idea of its perfection creates its perfection. But this doesn't just mean one dissenting action can topple it, but that untested for so long, they aren't even prepared for what can happen when one does. They allowed all their officers out into the field, leaving them undefended and unable to discern his plan until it's painfully clear. With no one to challenge them, their ability to self-preserve is actually greatly threatened during these entirely alien situations, even though self-preservation is their whole goal. If it wasn't for the will of individual citizens like Akane or Kogami who were willing to be challenged and wrong, Sibyl would have been toppled. Of course, it's due to comfort. Considering the idea that one might fail, that their methods could be wrong, and that they are inadequate is uncomfortable. It's a feeling often pushed to the side to continue pressing onwards, and no one wants to feel it in extremes. But we see here that ignoring it entirely leads to key aspects missed. No one can be perfect. Unless we look out for the ways we aren't, we'll miss the ability to correct them and grow. Further, this speaks to the very idea of perfection or God as elements of comfort. The highest feeling for them is believing nothing can even take away their status, that they truly are a kind of God. And a key component of God, which they directly mention, is omnipotence, being all-powerful. This means that not only is considering failure and protecting against it uncomfortable, but that it is directly against the idea of perfection. Because if one has to defend against failure, further, if one has to grow or change in any way, has any exploitable flaw, then they weren't all-powerful to begin with because there was something able to best them. This means that any being which purports to be perfect, to be entirely comfortable as is, inherently must reject any safety against not being so. It's the one good thing that Season 2 provides, the omnipotence paradox. If God can create anything, then they should be able to create something too heavy for them to lift. But if they can't lift it, then they're not all-powerful to begin with. Perfection is a state tended towards failure for this reason. But Sibyl is still a powerful entity. Even if its perfection spells eventual failure, it still provides temporary power, and so there is something to be said for it. But we have more to cover, revealing that the very base point of it and how that comfort they sought immediately destroyed the qualities which could have caused growth and perpetuated that power. What I'm saying is, the first action is already flawed. When Kozaburo Toma, acting as the representative of Sibyl, invites Shogo Makishima in, he says something like this.
I'm like you, a person whose crime coefficient can't be measured. Because of this, I spent much of my life alone and ignored.
This is something Kogami analyzes about Makishima as well, and feeling the latter directly states himself, going further to say that,
My solitude, as if that's only applicable to me. Really, who isn't alone in this society we've constructed?
As such, we can see it's quite a common feeling for the criminally asymptomatic minds. Every single member of Sibyl likely felt this kind of isolationist pain at some point or another. This means that Sibyl is essentially just a bunch of lonely, outcast people coming together to decide they are not to blame. Rather, they are correct in all instances, and this world is wrong, writing rules and regulations to confirm this fact. Like anyone else, they wanted to be acknowledged, accepted, normal, even hated because that meant something, and so they created a space to do so within each other. What this means is that the root of Sibyl itself is in part comfort. We see this further in how they court Makishima to enter, even though they say,
Let me remind you, this invitation is a courtesy, as we could simply make you a member by force.
If they were truly interested in becoming better lords of society, then force would have been the option. They'd have seen the damage he created, the risk he posed, and ends over means, taken him in and not courted him. But once again, they see themselves as gods unchallenged, and so they don't believe the risk will come true, even as it's already been proven. They ignore outright evidence by extending this offer. But even more, courting him is the comfortable option. Just like the minor villains, Toma and Sibyl wanted that warm, cozy feeling of convincing someone charismatic to enjoy their presence, to welcome their nature. Above all, they wanted the praise of someone else, even to their own detriment when you examine the situation without their bias. And that means that their bias, their comfort, is the worst thing for them, almost always leading to the worst outcomes they face. It's not just stasis, it's active downfall. We also see this in how quickly their ideals drop within Sibyl. I mean, just to start, Sibyl was a product of feeling lonely in society to some degree. But when they become members of it, they are the ones who create a lonely society to begin with. They are the ones causing the issues they seek comfort against. They're so blind that this is the state of their actions. But it's on an individual level as well. Toma was a sadistic killer planting horrible scenes. However, we can at least see that those horrible scenes had a message, a voice which was opposed to this society he found disgusting. He was commenting on care, which had turned into abuse and corruption from politicians, which Kogami clearly explains and gathers from his crimes. If nothing else, he was a proponent of change and originality, going against a society of rampant comfort. But now he is part of the body which creates that very thing he spoke against, literally giving orders to catch his pseudo-successor who performs the same actions. Crimes are crimes, but they can just as well have ideals behind them. And the second a heightened state of comfort was offered to him, all of those ideals strong enough he would kill for them are dropped. All their value is dropped. All originality, all higher thoughts, all possibility for growth and change discarded. It becomes just another disappointment to Makishima, misquoting his words back at him to try and draw out a positive reaction. A small detail shows the impact of this. When the pair reunite, Toma makes the effort to replace a book Makishima lent him when he was captured. The latter holds it the entire conversation, at first considering it a marker of importance, an effort that didn't have to be made. But as things progress, when he sees it's nothing more than Toma making a plea for the comfort of his friend, it becomes worthless, with Makishima using it as a weapon against him and ultimately discarding it. The reason is that its use as a tool of comfort has ridden it of true value. It wasn't an effort for greater purpose, but for the very base purpose which they used to fight against so harshly together. The point is clear. Not only does comfort create stasis, but it creates its own downfall when unchecked, despite all efforts or any power. When one is isolated from challenge, there is no way to prevent its inevitable takeover. And this is why, despite living the most comfortable life and even further being offered a level above that, Makishima rejects the invitation to Sibyl and insists upon chasing
The thrill that comes with actually playing in the game.
because watching over it is pointless, amounting to nothing more than watching others run and jump, change and grow with challenge, and making observations which one is isolated from. It's a cycle designed for nothing more than feeling good. And he knows this and can reject it so quickly because it's already the life he's lived. He rejected godhood long ago when he first set his sights on destroying this world. What he values is not the ability to do as he wishes, because that is not what free will is. Rather, it is the ability to try and do as one wishes, the component of chance, one will clashing against another and failing, which is what provides value to the process, knowing that for your desires to occur, another's may fail. It's along the lines of what we said with the importance of life, and the effort needed to take one proving its value. This is the step back, the bigger picture. Will must be tested and survived to have a point in being. This is what's expressed in the thrill of the game, not any sort of guarantee, and we know he values it because of the extent of testing he does before enacting his own will. Each minor villain is a test, finding someone who has the potential to challenge not just Sibyl, but also what he believes is its wrongdoing, the theft of free will. He finds people who have the most reason of anyone to act on their own impulses and desires, provides them the means to do so, and watches to see if they can. He wants to be wrong. Nothing would be better for him than someone to surprise him and show that their will is in fact still free. This is why he finds real value in Che Gusung over the others, because he's someone who will take his words to heart, listening when he suggests a book and further listening when he says that book must be physical. It is the willingness to not impress, to be someone with common tastes, which draws Makishima to this much less philosophical man who partakes in base pleasures, hanging out in bar back rooms with pretty women and casting them aside when something comes up. He has a place he carved out, he has a use to Makishima, and he doesn't seek to find everything in that, but simply what he can. The almost embrace of fault is why he persists with the madman where many more philosophical allies fall. The problem is that almost no one, not even someone like Akane, can prove Makishima wrong when he tests both society and himself, and so he eventually runs out of the will to test and decides he must act. And she really is the ultimate proof, showing both how confident he is in his ideals after so many tests, and how willing he is to still be wrong at once. In offering her a gun while he holds Yuki hostage, and even more directing her how to use it properly, he's saying both prove I can be stopped, and also, but I know you can't in the same exact breath. It's the distinction between he and Sibyl, who kill anyone aware of their secrets and tend towards self-preservation. Only by introducing the possibility to fail can he be certain of his actions, because they are tested, they are in trial, they, because of that, can be the very reason he dies, and as such holds the value of at least his life in whole. It's what Sibyl lacks, welcoming a challenge to strengthen themselves and understanding that if they can die from it, they had no right to rule in the first place. Makishima is willing to be wrong. It's just that no one was able to prove him so. And in this, there is proof that his status is lonely. A privilege, to be sure, but a solitary one. To have the ability to see and experience what feels alien to everyone else, to find it important and watch those who show potential quote his own words back at him, but missing the point of them. Even when he tries, provides everything an artist, a hunter, or an Avatar fan alike could need, he is unable to find a worthwhile connection there. That is loneliness, the feeling which drove the asymptomatic minds together. But once again, in contrast to Sibyl, he doesn't turn this into comfort-seeking. Where they ran into each other's arms to create a place where they'd find peace, he challenged the very idea of peace. He took that loneliness and used it as what it is, a negative emotion which pushes one to craft change, to remove the conditions causing loneliness, addressing the root and not the symptoms. In that way, it's a sort of still pleasure-seeking, because really, all things are. Everything from psychopaths to this essay on it, the words I'll speak to the person I love later tonight, they're all vague coverings placed onto base desires in order to satisfy our ability for reason. Like anyone else, Makishima desires to find comfort in someone else. The thing is, he understands that the best way to do so comes with a helping of discomfort. That tearing down the entire world will end all of the graces he knows, but open the potential for someone to finally speak deeply with him on a real level. That is, to gain something of that value, other value just as much must be sacrificed, or else it wouldn't be valuable. Trading the static, false comfort of Sibyl is worth gaining the true comfort of a connection between people who are in touch with their real desires, not masks on top of them. The point is, discomfort is required for comfort to hold value. To challenge it, to keep it fresh, to retest it and know it still withstands trial, and as such is worth more than that trial. His loneliness is proof of his ideals, and embracing that loneliness is how real change can occur. His pleasure-seeking is aimed at real value, not at simulated value. And this is why he embraces Shinya Kogami, the enforcer who seeks to, above all, kill Makishima in revenge for his fallen friend. In a world where artists and rich hunters are fawning all over him, his person of choice is the hunting dog who's caught his scent and desires his blood. By now, the reason should be clear. Kogami is the first person who's willing to test him back, to prove he's wrong, and as such show, without a doubt, that the values he holds are worthwhile if they can survive the test of a man set on murder. Even just capturing the attention of a man acting on his own will and showing an intent to destroy the other man's actions. Knowing someone hates him means he's important enough to hate after all. But even more, we see that the hatred between them, a wholly negative feeling, inversely breeds understanding and almost connection in a way. Kogami can track down Makishima where everyone else failed to, not only because of his strong desire to based on his own discomfort, and the express choice to hold on to that feeling and choose it over something or someone more comfortable like Akane, but also because of his outdated techniques like profiling. He pores over what he knows about the man, from his victims to his methods to his friends, and tries to predict his movements from this. Although it's in order to catch him, it means understanding him on a level no one else has. Where Toma quotes the man's one-liners to him in misunderstanding and ignoring the context, Kogami accurately calls things like Makishima quoting Gulliver's Travels in response to this, which Makishima actually does. Kogami didn't see this interaction. He simply knew that his sense of stiff humor would lead to such an interaction. He'll even admit when his former teacher, Joji Saiga, asks if they're similar that
He has some traits I understand.
there were plenty of people who tried to connect with Makishima based on perceived positive qualities, namely comfort. And what rose from those which came without challenge was a shallow regurgitation of semi-artistic principles, one-sided conversations without real tact. But when someone does so with hate, what came was a genuine understanding on an unheard-of level. Two men who live truly within the minds of the other, a place much stronger than our flimsy bodies. This isn't to say that hate is good, but simply that positive feeling alone is no way to build such a thing. It requires both components, a negative perspective to ensure a true and understood positivity. Like his embrace of loneliness, the discomfort of their opposing positions, it was what motivates each to drive harder for their goals and ideals than ever before. Hatred, after all, is what took Shinya Kogami off his hunting dog leash. It was the root of his freedom. And this all contextualizes Makishima's final speech, with a bit of air that he does put on drops, and his own pursuit of pleasure, found in the raw game of life and death, is on full display. Like anyone else, he is seeking pleasure and comfort found in others. But in this world where comfort is supposed to be king, such things are actually lacking.
Everyone is alone. Everyone's empty. With so much at our fingertips, we can find a spare for any talent. We don't really need each other anymore.
Comfort is required to be in their society. Anyone lacking it is cast off as a potential criminal. It is desired above all in their day and age as a means of basic survival rather than the feelings of hunger and pain which once drove humans. And so it is simulated. Everyone makes themselves believe it's achieved in order to survive, and in doing so come to believe it truly is once enough time has passed that they could forget. Anything which introduces discomfort, like a friend who asks you to question your purpose in life or important events, is cast off as a basic means of survival, replaced with one who won't because they must be to persist. People are there not for how they challenge them, not for how they make them feel, but because, just because they are there. Its proximity more than anything else, a state where closest in physicality is the best, mentality and emotion be damned. As he muses,
Any item, any piece of knowledge, any relationship can be replaced with a simple search and a click.
the immediacy and convenience of it all, the lack of effort required robs it of value with nothing given up in exchange. Anything they acquire is worth no time, no effort, no energy. And so it will be lost with no effort just the same. The pursuit of total comfort circles around to kill the reason it was valuable to begin with, that is, it isn't the default state. That pain and discomfort are, and they drive us to seek the opposite. It is a true, genuine, and awful pain that we know loss and violence and injustice and everything else one is inclined to list. From their mere consideration to the experience of them, they are the cause of more ills than can be counted. But this is the fact of life, a world derived from limitation and struggling for survival. For a relationship to mean anything, it must have the potential to end. For a connection to be worthwhile, it must have fights and conflict which test it, asking each participant if it is worth getting over those things to continue, making active minds consider active situations. We have to take effort to build them above other possibilities, limiting ourselves away from 100 options to pursue one which very well may fail, leaving us cold and alone. But in that despair, and the pain and tears of loss, we know that it was valuable because it can wreck us so. After all, if we didn't care when it ended, then it must not have meant much to begin with. And this is Makishima's very last line, where he asks Kogami,
Once this is done, will you find a replacement for me?
He dies with a smile when he hears the line, "I sure as hell hope not," because that means that, even if it was born of anger, this connection was something hard to obtain. It cannot be replicated or mimicked. Once in a lifetime, the man who it drove to break out of his shell will simply not be able to simulate it elsewhere and find that drive once more, but he must put time and energy and effort into filling the gap which is left. It is something so powerful it should end one's whole story, their reason for being dead with the body lying before them as they wander unsure of what life holds now. The lack of ability for this relationship to be replaced is the greatest pleasure Makishima could know. And in its loss, for the first time ever in a world of comfort, the greatest discomfort finally proved that he had any value to begin with. And that's going to wrap things up for this one. I originally had a story planned to go after this, a long, meandering story that spanned literally years of my life in a lot of detail, and I was just never able to get it, never able to make it kind of feel right for this, and it's kind of moved on to going into other videos and projects where I think it fits a bit better. You can probably tell this video was written a couple months back, where I was more in that kind of tragic, dramatic style. And the story was very much that, and I couldn't really put it in a way that didn't feel that way. So when I went to make that change, this video has been sitting basically done for a couple months now, and I wanted to move on from it, to kind of start into that new era a little bit better. And I guess not have it be perfect. I'm trying to almost think of some thematic end to this where I learned a lesson from it, but I think it's just kind of needing to move on from it for a second, to get on to those other things and see what happens. Maybe that's a little bit of discomfort there to have it not be perfect, but it's 50 minutes or so. It's like an hour-long video. There's something in here. I think it's good still. I think there's something important in here, and I did learn this lesson in real life and had experiences that made me realize it, but I don't think they're needed for this right now. I think the story itself was enough, and hopefully it'll give some reflection or some idea of your own moments like this and growth from them, or some validity to challenges that we faced or want to face. Something positive like that I hope can always come from this. But I've tried to record a few outros for this, and they were all terrible and rambling. I just wanted to leave it on a note that wasn't quite so tragic, dramatic. But usual stuff. Links in the pinned comment, Discord, and Patreon, where I'm trying to do a monthly Q&A thing for supporters there, and where you get your name in credits, like these lovely people above me right now who help me keep rambling every other week. But a big thank you to everyone for your time here today, especially on something this long, and I do hope that I'll see you again soon.